He put my legs on his shoulders, and that's when I realized I wasn't the only woman he had done this to. It was supposed to be a moment of deep intimacy, the kind that makes you feel safe, wanted, even loved. But instead, I felt cold. Not physically, emotionally. Something about the way he touched me that night wasn't filled with passion, it was mechanical, like he was going through the motions of a routine he'd rehearsed far too many times before. We'd been together for almost 3 years. 3 long, intense, beautifully chaotic years. In the beginning, everything was magical. The way he'd look at me like I was the only person in the room, the little notes he'd leave in my coat pocket, the way his voice would soften when he'd say my name. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. But over time, things started to change. It was subtle at first. Fewer texts during the day, less excitement in his voice when I'd call. He stopped noticing the little things, like when I'd wear his favorite perfume or make his favorite meal after work. I tried not to overthink it. I told myself relationships evolve, that maybe we were just moving past the honeymoon phase. But deep down, I knew something was off. That night, when he lifted my legs and looked into my eyes, something inside me shattered. His gaze wasn't tender, it was distant, detached. It was like he was looking through me, not at me. After he fell asleep, I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was sharing him with someone else, not just his body, but his attention, his affection, his soul. I remember quietly slipping out of bed, heart pounding in my chest, and sneaking into the living room. I just needed answers. Something. Anything. I opened his laptop, praying I'd be wrong, hoping it was all just paranoia. But what I found confirmed every fear I'd buried for months. There were messages, dozens of them, names I didn't recognize, conversations that made my stomach churn, pictures, videos. He had been cheating, not just once, not even twice, but constantly. And what hurt the most was how casual it all seemed to him, how effortlessly he juggled these women, like none of us really mattered. Each message read like a script. The same compliments, the same inside jokes, the same promises. And that's when I realized I wasn't special. I was just next in line. I sat there frozen, staring at the screen, the glow of the laptop burning into my eyes. But I couldn't look away. Each word felt like a knife, not just because of the betrayal, but because of how familiar his lies sounded. The sweet nicknames, the late-night heart emojis, the way he told one of them, "I've never felt this connected to anyone before." He had said the same thing to me once, almost word for word. I didn't cry at first. I didn't scream. I didn't even close the laptop. I just sat in silence, trying to piece together when everything changed. Was it that business trip last summer? Or the weekend he said he was visiting his cousin? Had I missed the signs? Or had I just refused to see them? The next morning, he woke up and walked into the kitchen like everything was normal. Like he hadn't shattered the trust I had placed so delicately in his hands. I watched him from across the room, the way he poured his coffee, the way he hummed to himself like he had no idea what I'd uncovered just hours earlier. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Pity for the kind of man who could have something real, something loyal, kind, and deep, and throw it away for cheap thrills and shallow validation. Pity for the man who didn't know what it meant to truly love someone with intention, with honor. I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I started observing him more closely. The way his eyes lingered on his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. The excuses that didn't add up. The sudden work calls that would pull him away mid-dinner. And the way he'd brush me off when I asked simple questions. I needed to be sure. I needed to feel in control of the storm that had torn through my heart. So I played the part. The sweet girlfriend. The understanding partner. All while collecting the pieces of my dignity and strength. I didn't just want to walk away. I wanted to walk away with clarity and with my head held high. A few nights later, I waited until he was in the shower. I unlocked his phone, something I had never done in our relationship, but now felt completely justified in doing, and started scrolling. More evidence, different names, flirty messages, receipts for hotel rooms. One message that simply read, Last night was amazing. Let's do it again soon. I took screenshots, sent them to my email. I needed to remember this pain, not because I wanted to hold on to it, but because I wanted to make sure I never tolerated anything like it again. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay beside him, his breathing calm, peaceful, unbothered, and I wondered how many other nights he had done this. How many other women had laid in the same bed, thinking they were the only one. I wanted to scream, to shake him awake and demand answers, but I didn't, because in that moment, I realized something even more powerful than rage. I was done. I wasn't going to beg for love. I wasn't going to compete with strangers for the affection of a man who didn't value me. And I wasn't going to waste one more breath trying to fix something he didn't care about breaking. The next morning, I got up early. I made coffee, sat on the couch, and waited for him to wake up. When he stumbled out of the bedroom, still groggy and wrapped in his usual routine, I handed him his phone. He looked confused. I simply said, "Check your email." He opened it. I watched his eyes move across the screen as the screenshots loaded one by one. His face changed from confusion to panic to silence. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. All he said was, "I didn't think you'd ever find out." That sentence hit harder than anything else he could have said. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say he regretted it. Just that he never thought I'd know. Like the betrayal was only a problem if it got caught. I stood up, walked past him, and went straight to the closet. I had packed a small suitcase. The night before, just the essentials. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to hear another word. The truth was already screaming loud enough. As I walked out the door, he followed me. "Please," he said, "let me explain. I messed up. I'll change. I swear." But I had already given him too many chances. I had spent months explaining how I felt, what I needed, how I deserved to be treated, and he had ignored it all. Now, the time for explanations was over. I turned back to him one last time and said, "You didn't lose me because you made a mistake. You lost me because you never appreciated me when you had me." I walked away without looking back, suitcase in hand, heartbreaking but soul beginning to breathe again. The first few days were a blur. I stayed at a friend's place. Someone who had always told me I deserved better but had never pushed. She welcomed me with open arms. No questions asked, just quiet support, the kind that speaks louder than any advice ever could. And the silence. Oh, the silence. It was both comforting and terrifying. I no longer had to wonder where he was, who he was texting, whether I was enough. But in that silence came all the pain I had shoved deep inside. The late-night cries, the unanswered whys, the memories that played on repeat like a cruel movie I couldn't pause. I found myself replaying the good times, our first trip together, the night he brought me flowers just because, the way he used to hold me like I was his whole world. And then, just as quickly, the illusions would shatter. Because those moments, they weren't built on love. They were distractions, a disguise he wore while his heart wandered elsewhere. There was a part of me that blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't affectionate enough. Maybe I should have noticed sooner. Maybe I wasn't exciting anymore. But the truth, I came to realize, and it took me weeks to truly believe this, is that his betrayal was never about me. It was about his own emptiness. His need to be admired by many because he couldn't be satisfied by one. He didn't cheat because I lacked something. He cheated because he lacked integrity, commitment, and the strength to face his own emotional immaturity. As the weeks passed, I began to rebuild. I started journaling again. I went back to yoga, something I'd abandoned in the chaos of trying to please him. I met with old friends, laughed over coffee, rediscovered the version of myself that existed before him, the version that was whole. I began to enjoy my own company again, and I slowly started to love the quiet. Not the silence that comes from being ignored or dismissed, but the peaceful kind, the silence that comes from not having to question your worth. One afternoon, maybe a month after I left, I got a message from him. It was long, a mixture of apologies, memories, and desperate promises. He said he missed me, that he thought about me every day, that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. He said he was going to therapy, that he had cut off all the other women, that he realized I was the one. For a moment, my hands trembled holding the phone. My heart wanted to believe him because when you love someone deeply, that love doesn't just vanish overnight. But I had learned something through all this. Apologies don't fix broken trust. Promises don't erase patterns. And words, no matter how sincere they sound, are empty without consistent action. I didn't reply, not because I hated him, but because I loved myself more now. I realized that going back wouldn't heal what was broken, it would only delay the inevitable. The pain, the insecurity, the fear, all of it would resurface again the next time his phone buzzed in the middle of the night. I couldn't live like that anymore. I deserved someone who chose me fully, faithfully, and without hesitation. I deserved someone who didn't have to lose me to see my worth. And most importantly, I deserved peace. I blocked his number that evening, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Because true healing doesn't come from reopening old wounds, it comes from protecting them as they close. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, stepped out onto the balcony, and looked up at the stars. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting on anyone. I wasn't wondering where he was or who he was with. I was just still, and in that stillness, I found something he could never give me: freedom. Freedom from lies. Freedom from fear. Freedom from pretending I was happy when I wasn't. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Slowly, my world began to feel like mine again. I no longer walked into rooms scanning for his presence, or checked my phone hoping or dreading a message from him. The weight that had pressed on my chest for so long started to lift. Little by little, people often ask me now, "How did you move on? How did you find peace after being so deeply hurt?" The truth, it wasn't quick. It wasn't easy. There were nights I still woke up crying, mornings I didn't want to get out of bed, but I kept showing up for myself. I started choosing me every single day, even when it hurt, even when my heart begged to rewind time. Because healing isn't about pretending the pain never happened, it's about learning to live beyond it. I surrounded myself with people who truly loved me. Not people who made me question my worth, but people who reminded me of it. I invested in myself not just emotionally, but spiritually and physically. I read books that soothed my soul. I took walks without a destination. I went on solo dates. I discovered what it felt like to truly enjoy being in my own company, and something incredible happened. I started to dream again. I dreamed of the life I wanted. A life where love didn't come with hidden terms and conditions. A life where I didn't have to shrink myself to fit someone else's idea of love. A life where I was no longer waiting to be chosen because I had already chosen myself. I never expected to become one of those people who says, getting my heart broken was the best thing that ever happened to me. But now I understand it. His betrayal was the fire that burned away everything false. It exposed all the cracks in the foundation I had ignored for too long. And in its place, I began building something real within myself. No more pretending, no more settling, no more pouring love into someone who only held me with empty hands. Months later, I walked past a cafe we used to visit together. For a split second, the memory of him sitting across from me, smiling like he had no secrets, flashed in my mind. But instead of sadness, I felt nothing. Not hate, not longing, just a calm acknowledgement of a chapter that had closed. That's when I knew I was finally free. I won't lie and say I've completely forgotten him. Sometimes a familiar song or scent still brings his face to mind. But now, those memories are like pages in an old book. I don't reread them anymore. I just nod at their existence and keep turning toward the next chapter. The funny thing is, I used to believe he was my forever. I thought our love story was the kind they wrote about in novels, passionate, dramatic, unbreakable. But it wasn't love. It was dependency disguised as desire. It was inconsistency masked as mystery. And the moment I stopped confusing his chaos for chemistry was the moment I started to live. Now, I love differently, including how I love myself. I no longer chase closure. I no longer wait for someone to apologize the right way or explain their actions with the right words. I give myself the permission to move forward, even when the answers never come. If you're listening to this and you've been betrayed, if you're lying awake at night wondering what you did wrong or why you weren't enough, let me tell you something you may not believe just yet. You didn't fail. You didn't lose. You were brave enough to love. And that in itself is strength. Don't let someone else's inability to be loyal rewrite the story of your worth. Your value doesn't decrease just because someone failed to see it. In fact, sometimes the greatest proof of your strength is what you choose to walk away from.